running away.
What?
Keeps running away, I said.
Yeah, it keeps going.
Okay.
Yep.
Good morning. Okay, we'll continue a little bit with the story of Kislev. Naturally, when the Alter Rebbe was arrested, everyone, besides all the Chassidim, everyone in the family was very affected, actually affected their health. But it says that it's interesting to note the one who was the strongest, sort of in mind and in spirit, and she's the one who gave encouragement to everyone else, was actually the Alter Rebbe's mother. Her name was Rivka, and she was the one that gave the Alter Rebbe, that gave the family the strength and encouraged them. She wasn't an ordinary woman either. But one time, it was like pretty close to Kislev, but nobody knew exactly. And the Mittler Rebbe fainted twice. And I said to him, I swear to you that my father told me that this week your father is going out of jail. So her father was no longer alive. But obviously, these are people who had other kind of communications. The father, I guess, came to her in a dream and told her that the Alter Rebbe is going out of jail this week. And that's how she calmed down the Mittler Rebbe. And there's a similar story that happened on the day of Kislev. It was the actual day of Kislev. And it was a chassid whose name was Rabbi Meshulam Yaakov. He was an older chassid, and because it was the Maggid Mezuzah's yard site, he was going to lead the davening. So the Mittler Rebbe told him that I saw the Maggid, and he told him that today my father is going out of jail, or today he went out of jail, and he's still suffering, but soon that'll be over also. Which later they understood. He went out of the jail, but he's still suffering in the house of that person for 3 hours. So he saw the Maggid himself told him that your father's going out of jail. And also, it's known that the Alter Rebbe had a daughter. Her name was Rebbe Dvorah Leah. And that's why there are a lot of Dvorah Leahs in Chabad. This Rebbe Dvorah Leah is the mother of the third Rebbe of Chabad, the Tzemach Tzedek. And there's a long story in terms of what her part was in saving the Alter Rebbe's life. This incident happened 7 years before the Alter Rebbe was arrested. And she heard from her father, the Alter Rebbe, 7 years earlier, that there's a Kitzur Glamaila, that in the heavenly court there is complaints against him that he's spreading Chassidus, and that the prosecution is so strong that he probably won't, I don't know how he said it, but he alluded to the fact that this will probably be the last year in his life in this world. And when she heard about it, she decided that she was going to take the Alter Rebbe's place. And she came to 3 of the oldest Chassidim at that time, the most prominent of the Alter Rebbe's Chassidim. And she said to them, there's something that I want you to do. She didn't tell them what, but I want you to promise me or swear to me that you're going to do it, even before I tell you what it's about. And they were it was shocking to them. And they weren't ready because they said to themselves, how can we commit ourselves to do something? They knew that she's the Alter Rebbe's daughter, that she's a tzedekis. They knew that she knows things that they don't know. They also knew that there's something going on The Alter Rebbe they saw in the way the Alter Rebbe conducted himself that there's something not so good that was going on, but still they had no idea. And they said, give us 3 days and we'll make a decision. They sat together for 3 days. Then she came again to them. It was before Rosh Hashanah. And they said that, they made up their minds. One of them said, but how can we do this without knowing what you want? But at the end, he gave in because he said, we already had our 3 days. We deliberated on this and we decided that we're going to do whatever she asks. And what did she do? She opened the Aron Kodesh and she said that she takes upon herself that she would exchange the Alter Rebbe so the Alter Rebbe could continue to live and spread Chassidus. And of course, when the Chassidim heard that, and she wants these 3 rabbis as a bezdin, as an authority of a Torah authority, to rule that she is taking the place of the Alter Rebbe, which means that she's taking upon herself to leave this world, and the Alter Rebbe will take her place. And of course, there was a lot of crying, but they made a shvua. They took an oath that they're going to do it, and they had no choice. And when was this? Erev Rosh Hashanah. And right away, on Rosh Hashanah, she became sick. And the day after Rosh Hashanah, she passed away. Tzemach Tzedek was just 2 years old at the time. And the Alter Rebbe took it upon himself and he promised her that he's going to raise the Tzemach Tzedek personally. And the Tzemach Tzedek grew up like the Alter Rebbe, as if it was the Alter Rebbe's son. And later he became the 3rd Rebbe of Chabad. So every single day, there was a minyan. There was 10 people. I think 10 people. Yes, they went to the gravesite of Rebbetzin Dvoraleya, and the Mittel Rebbe wrote something up that they should read every day until the Alter Rebbe is released from jail. And what did it say there? First of all, they wrote what happened, and they would read that, and then they said, we are a bezdin of 10 people, and they would read out their names. And they say that we are commanding you as a bezdin, with the authority of a bezdin, that you should go and tell the Magidim is rich and the Baal Shem Tov, go to their chamber in the heaven and tell them that they should do everything, that Alter Rebbe should go out free, and that this whole episode shouldn't affect Alter Rebbe's health at all. They did that every day until finally they were able to inform the good news. So let's get back to when the Alter Rebbe left the jail. One of the things that happened as a result of the Alter Rebbe being arrested was that tens of thousands of people after this became closer to Chassidus and began studying Chassidus and became followers of the Alter Rebbe. That was very, very simple because they saw that the people that are in the opposition have gone so far to form against the Alter Rebbe, to put him in a situation where he would be, God forbid, the way they wanted Chas V'Shalom to be executed. They realized that all of these things a lot of the things that are going on are lies, they're not true, and that as a result of that, they began to interest themselves more in who are Chassidim and what their way of life is. And thousands of people became Chassidim. They saw that the opposition has gone too far, and that shows that it's not really coming from a good place. But I want to mention one specific story. There was one city in Lithuania which was called Shventzion. And that city, the opposition there was one of the worst in the whole country. And the way they persecuted Chassidim was beyond anything you can imagine. There was a certain individual there who was, you would say, the biggest Torah scholar, one of the oldest people in that generation, and one of the biggest Torah scholars in the generation. And his name was Reb Shlomo Refoils. I guess it means his name was Reb Shlomo, and his father name was Refoil. And he was a strong he was first of all a great Torah scholar, and second of all, he was very wealthy. So they used the money and he employed his whole family. He was dedicated to fight the war against the Baal Shem Tov and against the Maggid Mizrich. And he spent a lot of money. His sons, his son-in-laws, his children, grandchildren, everybody was involved, and he mobilized everybody to fight this war against Hasidim. And then after a number of years, mysteriously, he stopped. Nobody knew why. Nobody knew what happened, but he stopped. And that was that. After a period of time, one of his grandchildren became a chassid of the Alter Rebbe. Imagine, he was like the head of the opposition, and here one of his grandchildren became a chassid of the Alter Rebbe. And there were more people in that city that were secretly chassidim, and they were studying Chassidim with other people secretly. And slowly, a lot of people in the town became close to Chassidus. At a certain point, they told the Alter Rebbe that they feel that the city is ready for the Alter Rebbe himself to come visit. And the Alter Rebbe himself should come there, and that would even strengthen more people. So the Alter Rebbe came to visit that city. He was there for Shabbos. And he was in the shul of this person whose name was Shlomo Falls. And he said that he'd like to say a few words in the presence of the Alter Rebbe. And he made an introduction that he's an older person and he can't speak very loud. He's asking everybody to really be quiet. And obviously it wasn't so common that he would speak publicly, so everybody was quiet listening. What does he have to say? And he said, I want to openly confess, yes, I was one of the people who stood at the head of the opposition against Chassidim, and I mobilized other people to go against Chassidim. And I'm standing here in a shul, I'm standing here in front of an Aron Kodesh, a Sefer Torah, and I want to say that there was absolutely no other agenda. My intention was purely l'shem shamayim, was purely for the right reasons, because of the truth. I was convinced that this is a movement which goes against Yiddishkeit. There was nothing else that was motivating me except for that I wanted to protect Yiddishkeit and protect people from not falling into a path which takes them away from Yiddishkeit. One day, I think he said it was his 70th birthday, I was sitting and learning Gemara, and suddenly I just couldn't stop myself, and I just fell asleep. As much as I tried, I couldn't hold back, I fell asleep. And as I'm sleeping, I see the image of a face of someone who looked like an angel. And he said to me, I am the Baal Shem Tov, that you and your colleagues came out against me. By the way, I want to say, what does it mean come out against you? There's something in Judaism is that when someone does something really very serious and becomes a real threat to the community, like the last sort of thing that can be done, which is the worst that can be done, is to put the person into excommunication. And excommunication means, the word for it in Hebrew, it's so severe, people don't even pronounce the word, they just say ches, but it's really a word spelled cherem, ches, reish, mem. And it's so severe that it means that this person is cut off from the community. We can't take him into the shul. No one should marry any of his children. No one should do business with any of with him or his family. And that's usually when it's found that somebody is really a very big Russia. So they came out with such a document against the Baal Shem Tov. And at a later point, they came out with this document against the Maggid Mizrich again. So he said that this person appeared to me, and he said, you and your colleagues came out against me with such a document. Did you do the proper research? In Gemara, it says there's a whole procedure how to research something like this before you come out with something so severe. Did you do the proper research before you came out against me? And he disappeared. I woke up and I said to myself, he's right. Did I do the proper research? And I began to research and do heavy, really intense research. Who are the Hasidim? And I was shocked to find out how frum they are, how God-fearing they are. They're davening, they're learning, their mitzvahs, they go beyond the letter of the law. It reminds me of a story where there was a similar story. Someone said, "Good morning, welcome back. You heard me telling a story, so you came. Okay." He said that there was a chassid of the Alter Rebbe once told a story how he became a chassid, and he said that he was in a city, not a city, it was actually a small little place, remote, and he had no idea that there was this raging conflict going on between chassidim and snagdim. He had no idea. But one time, which was the time when they arrested the Alter Rebbe, they also arrested two of his big chassidim. And these chassidim were being taken to Petersburg, and they passed my town. That's what he said. The head of the community said to the people in the community that on this day, two people from the Kat, they called them the Kat. The Kat is, I guess, like saying almost like the cult, the group. They're going to pass by our town. We should all gather together by the station, and when we see them, we should throw rocks at them. So they came to me because I'm their rabbi, and they asked me, is it okay to throw rocks at these Jews? So I said, why are you throwing rocks at them? So he said, well, they're heretics. They're people who don't believe in Torah, and they're spreading it. So he said, so practically, what do? Like they don't wear tefillin? No. They actually wear two pairs of tefillin. Rashi's tefillin and Rabbi Tam's tefillin. So he said, so what? They don't daven? No, actually they daven for hours every day. They don't wear tzitzis. No, they wear these long tzitzis that are almost dragging on the floor. So what they eat? They don't eat matzah on Pesach. No, on the contrary, they don't even allow the matzah to get a little bit wet. If it's a little bit wet, they already won't touch the matzah. It goes on and on. Everything he mentions, not only they're doing it, they're doing even more. So I said to them, this sounds like very strange heretics. I have to go meet them myself before I can make the judgment. So he said he went to the station, and sure enough, they brought these two chassidim. He said, I looked at their faces, and their faces radiated such holiness that I picked up a stone. And I said to the head of the community that if you don't leave this place immediately, I'll be throwing the stone at you. How dare you even think of throwing stones at these people? And then he started to do his research. And after doing his research, he found out who the Chassidim really are and what Chassidus is all about. And as a result of that, he himself became a Chassid. So here too, in his dream, the Baal Shem Tov said, did you ever do the real thorough research, not just superficial research? And when he started to do the research, he found out that the Chassidim are really not what people say they are. And as a result of that, he stopped getting involved in this whole controversy. And in fact, people came to him and they asked him, how come? Why did you stop? Maybe you found out that the Chassidim are really God-fearing Jews? He says, that's not even a question. But apparently, for some reason or other, he didn't tell people what happened. I don't know the reason why. It doesn't say why. But he said to them that since then, I've been following the Chassidim more and more, and I know about the greatness of the Alter Rebbe. And he said that I want to say now in front of everybody, he made a bracha, pronouncing Hashem's name. And he made the bracha, Shechiyanu, V'kimonu, V'giyanu, Lizman Hazeh. They had the merit to meet face to face with the Alter Rebbe, the head of the Chassidim, who is this kind of great person. And even though he didn't speak loud because he was an older man, but this talk that he gave made such a commotion in the whole area that as a result of this, many other hundreds or thousands of people started to get more involved in Chassidus and become followers of the Alter Rebbe, because he was someone that everyone respected, and they knew that he was very, very sharply against the Chassidim, and yet he turned around. So it all came as a result of the fact that the opposition was all based on hearsay, not the right, not true information. I don't know if you're aware of this, to what extent it was. In those days, if someone's child became a chassid, the parents would actually sit shiva. It was like he converted to another religion. At a certain point, it stopped. In other words, at a certain point, they realized, yes, the Chassidim are different, but it's a different path in Judaism. It's not Chas Hashem against Judaism. They learn Chassidus, they daven for hours, they do things one way, we do things another way. But you could have, this alone, it makes it so clear how in those days it was all based on misconception and misinformation and the wrong information, because it was to the extent that if somebody's child became a chassid, then Rahman al-Islam, they would sit as if the person died or the person converted to another religion. So when the Alter Rebbe was arrested, and people saw that they wanted to arrest him and God forbid execute him, they realized that it's gone too far. And as a result of that, many people, in fact, turned around and became closer to Chassidim. When the Alter Rebbe went out of jail, he wrote a letter, 3 letters. One letter is printed in Tanya. We're going to learn that tomorrow in class. One letter was sent to all the Chassidim, notifying them that he went out of jail. And there's another letter that was sent specifically to Rabbi Yitzchak of Berditchev, which Alter Rebbe was very close to him, and to Rabbi Baruch of Mezhebush. Rabbi Baruch of Mezhebush was a grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. His mother was a daughter of the Baal Shem Tov, was it? He was a grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. And he sent him a letter notifying that he went out of jail. So I just want to go over what it says in the letter. In the letter, the Alter Rebbe writes that his going out of jail was really miraculous. It was so miraculous that even the people in the government, even the people that were the people that were observing the whole thing from the outside saw that this is something miraculous, and they saw that Chassidus is truth, and that their fight against is not really justified. And Alter Rebbe writes, in what schus did he go out of jail? In the schus of the money that he sent to Eretz Yisrael, the schus of tzedakah, specifically the money sent to Eretz Yisrael, where you see really an amazing thing. On the surface, what caused the Alter Rebbe to get arrested? You remember the beginning of the story? What was the accusation? They said the Alter Rebbe is supporting the Turkish army with tremendous amounts of money, because he's sending a lot of money to Israel, which was under Turkey in those days. So basically, it was the money that he sent to Israel for tzedakah that got him into trouble, supposedly. What does the Alter Rebbe say? Just the opposite. It was the schus of the money that he sent to Eretz Yisrael that saved his life. And then, this is the famous letter where the Alter Rebbe said, I was reading Tehillim, and I said the words, Pada b'shalom nafshi, and as soon as I said these words, Pada b'shalom nafshi, no, he said, right before I started to say the words, I was right that by that pasuk, that precise moment, they let him know that he's going out free. And that's why Pada b'shalom nafshi is so much related to Yitzchak Kislev. And of course, it's also the yard site of the Magadim is rich. So that Alter Rebbe also associates it with that schus. In fact, before the Magadim is rich was nostalgic, he held the Alter Rebbe's hand. It was on the day that he passed. It was Yitzchak Kislev. And he said to him, today is our Yontif, both of our Yontif. So the Magid he passed away on that day. And the term he used was Yom Hilula, which in Aramaic, also in Zohar, means a festive day. The Alter Rebbe, 26 years later, on the day of that yard, said he passed away. In fact, there's a story with a group of Chassidim that lived in a city that was far away from where the Alter Rebbe was. But there's a story with a certain Chassid, I forgot his name. He was standing there at the time that they arrested the Alter Rebbe. He saw them take the Alter Rebbe away in this black wagon. And when he saw that happen, he fainted. They carried him in, they woke him up, and he fainted again. They woke him up, and he fainted again. And they realized that his life is in danger. This is going on for a while. So one of the Hasidim thought of an idea, and when they woke him up, he shouted, the Alter Rebbe is released from jail, it's taken care of, his back, everything's okay. But the man was so weak, he couldn't go outside. And of course, he couldn't find out that it's not true. So he was there for a few days. And later, he found out that Alter Rebbe was still in jail. But even though he was such a big chassid that he was so pained by it, but the shock was the first time, not the second time. So he didn't faint. This chassid in the city that he lived, the chassidim got together every single night while the Alter Rebbe was in jail. They would learn together. They would think of what they can do as a merit that the Alter Rebbe should go out of jail earlier. And this would happen every single night when they met. One night, it was Yutas Kislev. Yutas Kislev, besides being a night to meet together, it's also a time that the Mazrichu Magid's yahrzeit. So this chassid said that before he became a chassid of the Alter Rebbe, he was a chassid of a different Rebbe, Reb Mendel of Harduk. Reb Mendel of Harduk, that's the Rebbe that went off to Eretz Yisrael. So when he went to Eretz Yisrael, he said, I can't be without a Rebbe. And as a result of that, he knew that the Alter Rebbe and Reb Mendel were very close. So he became a chassid of the Alter Rebbe. And he said that either it has happened by the Farbrengen or before the Farbrengen, that he fell asleep. And his Rebbe came to him and he said to him, being that you used to be my chassid, I'm going to share something with you. And he said, tonight is Yutas Kislev. Tonight is the yahrzeit of the Magid Mezrich. So in Gan Eden, this is the Magid Mezrich big day. All the tzaddikim come to the Magid Mezrich on this day to celebrate together. So the Magid of Mezrich and the Baal Shem Tov was also a third, maybe the Arizal was the third one, that they were together talking about the fact that the Alter Rebbe is in jail. And then all of a sudden, who came in? Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. These are all the leaders of the hidden secrets of Torah. And the Magid Mezrich said to him that my Zalmanu, that's how we call the Alter Rebbe, Zalmanu, in an affectionate way. My Zalmanu is in the Tzara, and we have to help him. And then the Bezdin ruled that the Alter Rebbe has to go out of jail. And if they give that ruling up there, then this is what has to happen down here. So I want you to know that this is what's going on. After they heard this news that the Alter Rebbe is going out, they used to fast every day. Oh, that was what it was. They fasted all day, and they broke their fast together in the shul with the Farbrengen. So they still fasted because they didn't hear the news down here. They heard it from up there. And it's a dream. What? That this chassid had fainted, he's the one who had the dream. So the story is actually even found in a sikh of the Friedrich Rebbe, part of the story. So the chassidim in that city, when did they find out that Alter Rebbe went out of jail? They found out on Hanukkah, because it took a while for the news to travel in those days. But until Hanukkah, they continued to fast, and then they heard the news that Alter Rebbe went out of jail. And the Alter Rebbe himself, even though he went out of jail on Yutas Kislev, but when did he get home? He got home on Hanukkah. So there are a lot of sikhs of the Rebbe that talk about the connection between Yutas Kislev and Hanukkah. In fact, both came in the same month of Kislev. The Alter Rebbe went out of jail, but he was released. He came home on Hanukkah. And then if we have a few moments, I'll tell you the other part of the story. The Alter Rebbe was arrested a second time, and the second time he went out of jail on Hanukkah. So there's a connection there. And the connection is that Torah is compared to water. Torah is compared to wine. Torah is compared to bread. Torah is compared to oil. These are not just different analogies, but each one of them represents a different aspect of Torah. So oil represents the hidden secrets of Torah, represents Chassidus. And there's a sikh the Rebbe once gave. It became a booklet. It's been translated into English. In English, it's called On the Essence of Chassidus. The whole point of that booklet is, the Rebbe gave out, is to explain the association between oil and Chassidus. And that Chassidus is the deepest part within Torah, it's the Yechida, and that's the connection here to Chanukah. So the Alter Rebbe went out of jail on that day. The question is, why was the Alter Rebbe reading that chapter of Tehillim? That chapter of Tehillim, Pada B'Shalom, is on the 10th day of the month. And the Mitzvah Rebbe was actually released from jail on the 10th. And he was also saying Pada B'Shalom. But the Alter Rebbe went out of jail on the 19th. Why was he saying this chapter of Tehillim? So the Friedrich Rebbe answered that by the Rebbes of Chabad, if God forbid there was any kind of crisis, in addition to saying the Tehillim the way it's broken up by the month, days of the month, they would also say the Tehillim the way it's broken up by the days of the week. So if you look in the Tehillim, you'll see there's a Tehillim for Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Shabbos. And this Tehillim, chapter 55, is in the day of the week. That's Tuesday. That was the day he was out of jail. Tuesday, it was Parshas Vayeshev. There's also another interesting, there's a sefer called Shailas Etshuvas Min HaShamayim. You know what that means? It means questions and answers from heaven. This is written by one of the early Torah commentators. By the way, it's a book that you can buy in the store today. He would go to sleep at night, write down a question on a blank piece of paper. When he woke up in the morning, there was an answer. He made a whole book of all the questions and the answers that he had. So it's very interesting. It's almost like a prophetic book, but you don't find dates, just questions and answers. In one of the questions, the answer that came from Shemaim has a date, and the date is Yutas Kislev, a day of good news, Yom Besura. But it doesn't say. But no one ever knew anything in history that should make Yutas Kislev an outstanding date. The only thing we know is this day that the Alter Rebbe went out of jail, and that's the day that Chassidus began to be revealed on a whole new level. So, let me see. So I just want to mention briefly that 2 years later, Alter Rebbe was arrested a second time. Once wasn't enough. He was arrested a second time. It was also the same time. It's interesting, the same time of the year. This time of the year was right after Simchas Torah. That was the first time. That was the second time. I mean, the same with the Mittel Rebbe. He was also arrested the same time of the year, right after Simchas Torah. And when did he come out? Also in Kislev. When he came out in Kislev, in some places it says it was the third night of Hanukkah. Some places it says it was the fifth night of Hanukkah. So in Yiddish, they call it the dritte Lichtel, means the third candle, or the fifth candle. But somebody once asked the Rebbe about this question, and the Rebbe answered, first of all, some people say when the Alter Rebbe was arrested, Chassidim were also arrested. One of them is when the Alter Rebbe went out of jail, and the other one is when the Chassidim went out of jail. But the Rebbe gives a different answer. And the Rebbe says apparently there were two parts that was going out of jail, and the first stage was on the third night, and the second stage was on the fifth night, which is similar to the Frierdiker Rebbe. Let's say the Frierdiker Rebbe went out of jail Yud Beis Tammuz, but we celebrate the 12th of Tammuz and the 13th. Why? Because he was told on the 12th of Tammuz that he's free. But they said to him, today is a national holiday. We can't give you the legal documents. So therefore, wait till tomorrow. We'll give you the legal documents. As a result of that, we have two Yom Tovim, Yud Beis Tammuz, Yud Gimel Tammuz. The Mittel Rebbe was told on Tes Kislev that he's going out of jail, but he actually went out on Yud Kislev. So apparently by the Alter Rebbe, there must have been also two things, something that happened on the third night and something that happened on the fifth night. And that's why, again, interesting that the second time was also, there was an incident that happened. I'm not sure, I think it's not clear whether this happened after the first time or the second time. But again, the way I heard the story was that it happened the first time when the Alter Rebbe was in the house of the Misnagid. And a different version that happened the second time, that there was a Misnagid that said, I'll help the Alter Rebbe get out of jail, because he had contacts and connections with the government, but on a condition that he promises me that after he goes out of jail, he's going to meet with three people that are the leaders in the non-Hasidic community. And maybe by meeting with them, things will be straightened out. And the Alter Rebbe made the commitment. And he met with three people who are leaders of the community, in the Lithuanian community. And there's a story with each one. But the one that's most famous is there was someone called Rabbi Shua Tzeitlin. Apparently he was, first of all, a great Torah scholar. Second of all, he was an activist and community leader. He was also very wealthy, very well known. And he was one of the people he wanted the Alter Rebbe to meet. And I guess he was hoping either he'll straighten out the Alter Rebbe or the Alter Rebbe will make things clear and there won't be any more fighting. What happened was with him, the story was that he wanted to test to see if the Alter Rebbe is really a big tzaddik. So what he did was, it says, L'yuna l'tzaddik kol oven, which means Hashem protects tzaddikim that they won't stumble and without realizing and do an avera. So what he did was something a little tricky. He had a worker which wasn't Jewish, but in those days the workers that weren't Jewish, because they grew up in a Jewish community, they spoke a fluent Yiddish. You could never know. And this worker, when the Alter Rebbe was there, he said, "Could you bring some wine from the basement?" He went to bring wine, put it down on the table, and wanted to see if the Alter Rebbe is going to know not to drink it. The Alter Rebbe takes the cup and starts making a bracha. Now, he had no intention, as a religious Jew, to make another Jew pronounce Hashem's name in vain or make him eat treif. So his plan was, if he sees the Alter Rebbe is going to make the bracha, he'll stop him and tell him, "Oh, a mistake. This wine is not kosher. A non-Jew is handling it." But what happened was, when the Alter Rebbe did the bracha, his face suddenly changed. The words that came out of his mouth, he never in his life heard a person make a bracha like this. He was so overwhelmed, he forgot to stop the Alter Rebbe. So he continued. And he made the bracha, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, shehakol niyah b'dvari, and he drank it. And then he told him, by the way, this isn't wine, this is honey wine. In other words, the non-Jew, by mistake, brought up the wrong bottle. And Alter Rebbe understood everything, and he said, it's honey wine. And by the way, right now, there's a shaila on all the wine in your basement, because you had a non-Jew go down there. So if there's any bottles that were not sealed, it's going to be a question if it's kosher or not. So that was the first Shalom Aleichem, and he saw the Alter Rebbe is not an ordinary person. And then they went on with discussion, and after he left, he himself came out saying the Alter Rebbe is a godly person, and he's a very big tzaddik, and nobody should do anything against him. And slowly, all these things brought out that much more people became closer to Chassidus and so on. And the other two, they were also great Torah scholars. And one of them was so brilliant, we can't even imagine how brilliant they were. Like, only thing you can compare it today is to computers. He asked the Alter Rebbe, how many times in the entire Shas, which is thousands of pages, does it say Abaye and Rava? These are two famous people in Gemara. The Alter Rebbe gave him a number. And he said, no, you're wrong. It's one number off. You know, this is the only thing that can do this today is a search and a computer. Shas is thousands of pages. How many times does it have these two names? And you click on a button and a number will come up. The Alter Rebbe gave him a number. He says, you went off. The Alter Rebbe says, no, I'm not off. It's exactly the number that I gave you. And the place that you think that it says Rabba, it's not Rabba, it says Rabba. It's spelled with a hey, not an aleph. Now, this is a person that he was such a big Torah scholar that whoever came to him was like totally overwhelmed, and he hardly respected anybody. After this, he went crazy about the Alter Rebbe, and he also publicized Alter Rebbe as a big Torah scholar, and he's a tzaddik, and everybody should respect him. So basically, what came out of this visit was the opposite, that more people became closer to Chassidus and followed Chassidus, and so on. There's a lot to talk about. We can have this class every single day to talk about understanding the difference between Chassidus and what's without Chassidus. What's the difference between Chabad Chassidus and other Chassidim? What's the difference between Chassidus and Kabbalah? So one day we'll go into all that. But at least this is a little bit of introduction to tomorrow, to Yutis Kislev. Tomorrow we'll have Fabrengen, but in class we'll learn a part of Tanya, a letter that Alter Rebbe wrote after he went out of jail. Okay? L'chaim, l'chaim. Don't worry, it's water.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi.
Welcome. Have a great Shabbos, everybody. Oops, it's only Thursday, sorry. But still, we can have a great Shabbos.
Richard gave me the front cover. The first page is not dark enough.
You're talking about Pirkei Avos?
What?
Pirkei Avos?
No.
Hayom Yom? Okay. Yeah.
Can I put a parve soup that was made in a fishy oven in the mythic fridge downstairs? It's like vegan.
The soup is parve.